Hold on, what's
Live-ish?
this? You're doing the introduction to my video?
I think so.
All right, go ahead.
Or you want to do the introduction?
I mean, I'll let you if you want. It's
Shall I
your
do
gym
it?
in the end.
You have the script?
Script?
Hayden?
Sorry, I forgot it.
It's in the car.
Yeah.
This is Mark Bell from SuperTraining Gym. SuperTraining Gym, the strongest gym in the West. And today I have two wonderful, jacked people to describe how to squat. They went over some stuff on how to bench press. I think she has 20-something all-time world records, right?
22.
22?
Yeah.
It's all
Oh
right.
my God.
I
22
keep
all-time
track.
world records. He doesn't have any, but he's got some decent information
I'm the good looks.
every once in a while, too.
It doesn't really make him a worse person, you know?
Steph, Cohen,
doesn't make
Hayden,
him a bad
Bowe.
person.
These guys got the hybrid method going. They have thousands upon thousands of people following the hybrid method with great success. So they're going to take some people here at SuperTraining Gym and show them how to squat. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay.
So, you want me to start?
My ass, my sweaty
Yeah,
Or you
you
want to start?
So
So usually when we have somebody come in, I'll get them to do a squat first if they have some exposure to lifting, just so I think you can learn a lot about people just by watching what feels natural to them. Sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not good, but I kind of like to see how they move first and then sort of make adjustments based on that.
you have him do body weight movements first?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few tests we can do. Should we go through with
The heel test?
the heel test?
Before we go into the heel test, so one thing that I like to do is just watch how they move without a bar on their backs, because a lot of people, especially that are coming to the gym first time, are not ready to have a bar on their backs. So I just want to see, do they have their required ankle mobility to perform a squat? Do they have their required knee stability? And then do they have enough hip or pelvic control to perform a squat? So the first exercise we do, I guess we'll go through the heel one first, and then I'll take it through.
Okay. So a really commonly asked question is, should you be wearing a flat to squat in or a lifting shoe like Steph has here? And the answer is, like most things, it depends. So we do something called a heel test. And what you do, this is something you can do at home if you have a mirror or if you have an iPhone or whatever type of phone, and you can film yourself and watch your squat back. Basically what we're trying to do, you want to set up so you can see your side profile. You're going to squat down. You're going to try to keep your lower back neutral and reach parallel. So what we're looking for in this part of the test is, if you can't make it to parallel without this happening, you consider that a fail. Not that a fail is necessarily a bad thing. We've said fail before in the past and people got very upset at us for that. So fail is not bad and pass is
Steph,
not
you wanna
necessarily
try?
good.
Try without your shoes
We're just
on.
using it to sort of evaluate the test. If you do fail the first part of the test, we're going to go ahead and put something like a platform underneath your heels.
Have Steph do the test.
Sure. So let's pretend she failed the first part.
I can fail. What do you need me to do? I'll show you some failure. What do I have to do? I have to go
So
squat.
a failure is if you can't make it down to parallel without getting a butt wink in the squat.
How am I doing?
You're so far so good. Let's go a little deeper. A little
Is that
deeper.
for real? Is that for real?
That is for real. I get stuck. I'm right here.
Okay.
Okay, so generally
I'm
if
still far away.
someone's losing their lower back and your hips are tucking under before you reach parallel, we'll get you to put your heels up on something. This is a little thin for you. Maybe you need two. It's okay, actually. The bigger the elevation, the more obvious it'll
Yeah,
be.
like the Beyonce high heels.
Exactly.
Facing this way or this way?
Either, but just basically you want to use this like as if it's a weightlifting
Oh,
shoe.
gotcha.
We're going to retest the squat.
I just have a feeling that she wouldn't have failed very good. So you want
Sure.
failure.
So now
gotta
you're going
come
to try to
in.
do the same thing. You're going to try to not allow yourself that butt wink. And you'll see here he can do it perfectly. He can go up and down, no butt wink. He's reaching depth fine. And if someone
what depth
passes
feels
this
like.
part, so if you fail the first part of the test and you pass the second part, that means that your main limiting factor is your ankles, and you'd benefit from something like a weightlifting shoe. Now that's not to say that you should stop working on ankle mobility and just use a weightlifting shoe to band-aid the problem, but it is something that's going to allow you to squat with proper technique right away, so it might be good to use a weightlifting shoe. If they also fail this part of the test, then you know that the problem is coming more from the hips and not so much from the ankles.
Let's see what these two guys look like when they do it.
Yeah. So let's do the first one with nothing. Just a regular squat.
Arms out.
Yeah, whatever
you
feels
are.
Whatever way
natural to you.
can balance, yeah. Not bad. He's better than me.
Yeah. Looks
You
good.
don't have to go all the way down. Let's just go right to parallel.
He doesn't really squat.
So you're, I think you actually look pretty good. So if you're somebody like you and you're not failing any part of the test, then it's preference. If you feel better in a weightlifting shoe, you can wear a weightlifting shoe. If you feel better in a flat, you can wear
Do you
flat.
squat with heels or without?
I don't squat.
You don't squat?
He's just getting used to it now, yeah.
No, like pretty good.
Thank you.
You do squat.
And you're the same. Unfortunately, you picked two people that move really well. So,
I'll fail.
yeah.
One thing I got a question for you. Go ahead and do that again. So with females, I see this a lot, and maybe it's just because they have like, sometimes have longer legs and shorter torso. You see the knees come forward a lot, which I don't have any problem with, but just asking a question out of pure curiosity. What are you guys looking for when you're watching someone squat and you're watching the knees? Are you okay with the knees traveling forward? Are you okay with the heel maybe popping up? Because sometimes if the knee travels forward too much, then sometimes the heel will pop up. What are you guys seeing?
I think the knee coming over the toes is totally fine.
As long as the heels stay on the ground.
As long as the heel stays on the ground, exactly. I actually think it's especially important if you're going to squat in wraps. You can sit back a lot further and get a lot more out of your squat if you're squatting in sleeves or with nothing. But with wraps, you really, to get the most out of the wrap, you really want to drive into them, and that means you're going to have to put your knees over your toes.
Yeah, essentially in whichever joint that you see the most change in motion, those are the muscles that are going to be working more. So if there's greater change on the front of your legs, then that means the quads are working more. And if you see the hips shooting back, then that means that you're using more of the muscles in your back. That's all that means. There's not necessarily right or wrong. It's more so dependent on which muscles are strongest for you. So if you have a really quad dominant squat person, you're going to see them use or drive their knees forward a lot more. If you see a hip dominant squat, then you might see them lean back on their backs more.
What if the
on their hips
knees,
more.
every time they go to come up, the knees start to cave in a little bit? What are your thoughts on some of that?
Yeah, so there's a difference here's two parts of that. The first part is there's not really a proof that it necessarily predisposes you to more injuries. So that's a concern of a lot of people, whether or not knee valgus increases the chance of injury. There's really no direct correlation that puts an increased knee valgus with an increased risk for injury. I mean, you see at the Olympic level all the time people doing cleans with an excessive knee valgus with no knee pain and no injuries at all. Now, from an energy efficiency standpoint, you want to minimize those leaks as much as possible, and you want the joints, every single joint, to be as stable as possible so that you can transfer that force more efficiently from your muscles towards the ground and back up. So I would say just from an efficiency standpoint, you want to minimize that as much as possible and just try to make your movement as proficient as possible.
I think
Yeah,
an
some
easy
stuff-
way,
Go ahead.
easy way to remember that, the way I've always thought about it, is any movement that happens in your body should translate into movement of the bar. So if you're getting lots of movement, but the barbell isn't moving, I mean, I can stay in the same spot and do this with my knees all day long, and the barbell's not going up, but I can't extend my knee without the barbell going up. So you always want to do something that's translating directly into the movement of the bar.
The other part is where in the movement is the knee valgus occurring. Now, we know that at the bottom of the squat, your adductors actually play a huge role in the extension of the hip. So below 90 degrees of motion, your adductors are powerful hip extensors. So naturally, they're gonna kick in at the bottom of a squat, and you're gonna see that kind of like twitch of the knees, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you see me coming up and my knees slightly come in, and then as you come up, they go back to normal. That is natural, and that is exactly what's supposed to happen. Your adductors are gonna kick in below 90 degrees, and they're gonna help you extend your hips. That's a good thing. That's a knee twitch. That's something that you shouldn't be worrying about. There's a lot of people who, at the first sight of knee movement, they always, come tell you that you're squatting wrong, that you're gonna break your knees. It doesn't really happen that way. Now, where it does matter is after 90 degrees of motion, especially in movement. Like if you see someone doing cutting or doing lateral lunges and you see that knee caving, that's exactly how you tear your ACL. So that rotation and change of direction, that's how you tear an ACL. You're not doing that in a squat, so it's not something that I would necessarily worry about.
I'd also be maybe a little bit more worried about someone's lower back more so than their knee. When the knee caves in, it's actually a lot of times coming from the hip. You're like no longer really forcing your knees out any longer. And what I've seen over the years is I haven't really seen a knee injury from just that. What I usually see is somebody starts to round over. They like lost their back. They come out, shoot up out of the bottom of the squat. Their knee caves in. Now they're kind of doing this whole thing. And now they have a lot of loss of energy into the bar, right?
Absolutely, yeah, not enough pelvic stability. Now the knee valgus can happen from below the joint or from above the joint. For example, people that don't have a good arch on their feet, or people who have overly pronated feet. Say if I didn't have a good arch, this is how my feet would naturally sit, and see how it forces my knees in. So that's one reason for knee valgus. Another reason for knee valgus is what Mark was talking about, which is the instability of the hip. Lateral muscles aren't doing their job of maintaining the knees out. Couple that with the adductors pulling the knees in, and then you have all sorts of compensations that happen above, on the low back, on the upper back, etc. Rotation, things that are undesirable if you're trying to lift the most amount of weight.
Squat test.
Yes. All right. What am I doing again?
Just a regular squat.
Yep, just an air squat.
Just an air squat. Oh, shit.
It looks pretty good. And keep in mind, Jess just had knee surgery. That's pretty good.
Yeah, just pretty good.
Yeah,
You're
it's
somebody
awesome.
who could use either.
You were mentioning about the barbell moving a lot. People having wasted movement, where their body is moving, but the
Sure.
barbell's not. It's not really. It's not progressive towards them making the lift. And I see that a lot too. Like sometimes somebody will set up, and then they go to do a squat, and they kind of like move here, and they did a lot of that kind of movement. What are you guys seeing with some stuff like that? Like, are you trying to have people like start at the knee first, or break at the hip, or how are you coaching the squat from the beginning?
For what?
Just from I see a lot of people that kind of like they push back with the hips, and some people say to push the hips back first. Some people say to break at the knees first, and some people say to do both simultaneously. Ed Cohen says open up the taint. Where do you guys kind of sit with some of that, like beginning motion? What do you think people should? I guess it'd be different for each person, but.
Yeah, I think it's important just to think about what feels the most natural for people. Usually you're going to gravitate towards what's the strongest position for you. So I think those over-exaggerations in the movement that you see it a lot in people who try to oversimplify the movement in sort of football settings. You see it a lot. You'll see a lot of guys unrack the weight, really tuck their hips, and then go back like that. And you see a lot of people getting dumped forward. You saw the same thing. I trained a lot of hockey players in Canada, and you see that kind of stuff, where you're trying to give people these simple things to remember, almost like a process to go through in the lift, and they end up taking it too far. But I think in general, when you just tell people to do what feels natural to them, they kind of move properly.
Yeah, the main reason why you would want to change someone's technique is if it's leading to some sort of compensation or inadequate movement. So for example, someone who starts at the hips and really exaggerates bending back is gonna have a hard time hitting depth, because they're just winding their tissues way too much. They're anteriorly tilting their pelvis, and that's gonna make it really hard for them to hit depth. On the contrary, if you have someone who really exaggerates the knee angle and starts by bending their knees, you're gonna see them maybe lose balance at the bottom of the squat, lift their heels. So that is a really good time for you to modify their technique. Now, a really good place to start is just telling people to drop their hips in between their feet. That's kind of the cue that I use. I don't tell them break at the knee or break at the hip first. I think that's something that they figure out on their own based on what they prefer. But the cue is just drop your hips between your feet, break out wherever you want to break. I don't even address that. So that usually leads to a really natural position of the hips and of the knees.
Very cool. You get these guys started.
Sure.
Yeah. And the last thing, so before the bar.
Yeah.
So this is a really great simplified process that I learned actually from Jordan Shallow, where you test, before you have someone load a bar on their back, you test their mobility, then the stability, and then go strength. So that's kind of like the step-by-step process that he goes through, which I find awesome. So we already tested mobility at the ankle. We tested mobility obviously at the hip when we saw them just do their squats. Now the stability, the way that I do it is I see how people move on one leg. So what I do is, can you do 5 lunges forward and then 5 lunges back? And you'd be surprised when you see someone walking into the gym for the first time, they have a really hard time doing this movement. And here you can watch I'm really paying attention to where their knees are going. Do they have enough ankle dorsiflexion to perform that? Yeah, do it this way, yeah. No, yeah, turn around and do it. Are they hips even, or do they drop from side to side? Can they maintain balance? Some people start falling all over the place. Okay, good, so that looks really good. Now the next one that you're gonna do, you're gonna stand on one leg. This one's called a hip airplane, also classic Jordan shallow. You're gonna drop straight forward, trying to keep your hips stacked. And then you're gonna try to open, and then you're gonna try to close. So this is testing both mobility and stability. So you're testing here, your hip is in an internally rotated position, then you're externally rotating, then you're going back to internal rotation, and then you're going back in. Now we have what's called couple motions at the hip. At the hip, when you're in extension, your hip is externally rotating. On your inflection, it's internally rotating. So all of those are motions that you must absolutely have before you start loading a movement pattern. So that's what we're gonna test now.
Does it matter if it's back leg straight or bent?
No, you can keep it straight or bent. This knee, bend it a little bit. Always athletic stance, yep. And here too, I'm looking at the knee. Do you have enough stability at the knee? You have enough stability at the hip? You have enough control to be able to externally rotate, and back up. Do it 3 times.
That's pretty damn good for first go.
Good, one more. That's really good. Cody, let's see you do it. He's there in the back. Are you hiding from me?
Get out. Come
In front of the
this way.
camera, Cody.
Are you hiding from me?
You did good. You do the other leg too.
Okay. You want me to attempt that?
What? Yeah.
This is a real airplane. It's the size of an airplane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Lower, lower, lower. Good. Now open up your hips.
I don't know if that worked that way.
Like this. Okay.
Whoa.
So what would you say isn't it crazy that honestly there's people that do that movement like that and then are just trying to load the bar. They're gonna be able to do it. It doesn't mean that they're not gonna be able to squat. They are gonna be able to squat, but at some point something's gonna give because they don't have the prerequisites necessary to actually perform that movement on their load. So it's not necessarily that if someone fails the test, I would stop them and tell them, hey, you can't squat until you can pass this test. It's just, hey, look, this is a red flag. This is something that you're gonna have to work on in parallel to increasing your squat. So now you know. And here's the good thing about it. Obviously there's a learning curve, and the more that you practice this movement, the more that you're gonna get good at. And that is because stability is neurally derived. So these adaptations to stability happen after one trial. The next time you try it, you're gonna notice that you're gonna be better at that.
Sure.
Yeah, 100%. Send me a video in 3 weeks. Practice it every other day, and you'll see how you get better.
It won't take long.
Exactly, because stability improves from day to day. It's neurally derived.
I drove on the wrong side of the road. I'm not that coordinated.
You'll get better.
Okay.
So now that we got that out of the way, remember we went through, we checked to see if they have the mobility required at the ankles. We checked for the knees to see if they have the stability necessary to control the knee. And we checked the hip to see if they have both mobility and stability. So mobility, stability, and now we're gonna do strength, work on strength.
Cool. Is this the right height for you?
Yes.
And you squat low bar or high bar?
Low bar.
Low bar? Okay. Let's see how you set up. Okay, so the things we're looking for
Hi.
here, you want to always put your hands in a position that's comfortable. So somewhere that's not cranking your elbows too much, it's not causing too much stress on the shoulders. That's going to be individual for the person. The only thing we want to avoid is if people have difficulty having their arms, just outside shoulder width, and you see them over time getting wider and wider. That's something that can lead to issues later on, and Stefi can talk more about
What
that.
you're saying about the elbows is trying to make sure that you're not in a position where it
That's
hurts,
causing-
aggravated.
Yeah, that's causing stress and tension on the elbows or on the shoulders. So somewhere that's comfortable, you want to squeeze your back together, and that's going to create a shelf on the rear delts here. It's where you want to place the bar. A lot of time, an easy way to get yourself into that position, you'll see a lot of people do it where they kind of slide the bar past their rear delt, and then they'll bring it back over, and it kind of pops into place, and you can
Just
feel it.
pop out of there for a second. Show us what that looks like for you.
Sure.
So, you're just talking about like kind of getting the bar to
Yeah.
pop into a spot.
So you go past the part where the bar is going to sit, and then when you pull yourself back under, it kind of slips right into that spot.
Got it.
And then that's a stable spot that the stable spot that kind of creates a shelf that's not going to let the bar slip off when you're in the middle of the lift.
Steph, you can pop back in here.
Awesome. So next thing we're looking for is having a neutral spine. So you don't want to have a huge arch in your back. You also don't want to have your hips too tucked under. The way she's doing it right now is perfect. So you can just stand up with the bar. I skipped one step. You want to take a deep breath. You want to brace. If you have a belt on, you kind of want to push out into the belt, fill up the belt with air as much as possible. And then to walk out, you can do whatever is most comfortable for you, but an easy way to teach it is we teach 3 steps. So step back with the other foot, and then the third step is just to make sure your feet are in line. Yep. The foot width is going to depend on the way your femurs come out of your hips. So if you're somebody with wide hips and a wide angle, you're going to have your toes pointed out a little bit more. If you're somebody with narrow hips, you're going to have more internally rotated toes.
I'll show them a test that they can do on their own to check more
Yeah.
or less like where their hips are aligned. You can rack step. Okay, so like I said, you should never try to force a movement upon a person. You want to try to work with their anatomy. Now, every person has a different orientation of their hips, way that their hips are oriented. So in your hips, you have your acetabulum, which are 2 fossas that receive the heads of the femur. Some people have those acetabular fossas out wide. Some people have them right forward. Some people have them pointing down. Some people have them pointing up. And everyone has a different one. So you want to make sure that the technique that you're using is playing to your anatomy. So an easy passive test that you can do is, go ahead, Steph, lie on your back right here. You can either have someone or you can do it really by yourself. You're gonna bend your knee, just relax, and you're gonna see at what point do you have the most range of motion. So see how here you get pretty stuck. Some people even feel a pinching
And then,
sensation in the
Steph,
front
you
of the
can
hip.
actually feel that as you're pushing her
I can
leg.
feel
You
it,
can
yeah.
feel it,
I
right?
can feel what's
the
stopping
tension.
me. So now we're gonna go a little bit wider, a little bit wider. Look at how much motion she has here, than she has here. It's pretty significant, even out here. So now I think this range is a good range. You can either put your like here, here, here.
You can see
Those
like
would all
the
work.
toe like automatically just pointing outward, too.
Yep.
Yeah, which is the
Absolutely.
same as how it was in her squat too.
Right.
That's what naturally felt good for her too, right? As soon as she walked out, her feet were a little bit wider and her toes were pointed out.
Yep, absolutely. So there's a school, I think the most popular opinion on where your toes should be pointing is pointing the toes out. But then again, that's also depending on your anatomy and your preference as well. To give you an example, if you point your toes out way too much, there's something that's called the length tension relationship, and that basically of muscles. That basically says there's a point at which the muscle is the strongest. I'll give you an example that you can easily visualize, which is your arm, your bicep. So this is the point at which the bicep is the strongest. At this point, it's not as strong as this one. This one is not strong as this one, and so on and so forth. There's different points and lengths, the muscles, that have the most cross-bridging of every single individual muscle fiber. So when it comes to the hip, obviously you have muscles that attach, they go from your sacrum all the way to the head of your femur. And so sometimes if you externally rotate your leg too much, you're placing those muscles at a disadvantageous position and at a suboptimal length tension relationship. So you want to keep that in mind. For some people, having their toes pointed straight forward might feel like they can create a lot more stability of the hip than if they just point them out and start relying on passive stability from ligaments and muscles and bone.
You see that a lot in deadlift too, where people talk about turning the feet out to be able to engage your glutes more. And just like you're saying, a lot, or sometimes, depending on the person, that is actually going to make your glutes engage less.
Exactly.
For that exact same reason.
Exactly.
So it's
Yes.
not a blanket sweeping approach for everybody.
Do you guys feel there's any reason to play with that? Like, let's say that you kind of naturally walk with your feet pointed out quite a bit. I see that a lot
Some
with like
people.
wrestlers, kind of collegiate wrestlers that kind of like walk, you know, their feet pointed out. People that do like MMA, and then we have some people come in and squat. They want to kind of squat, you know, with their feet out quite a bit. Is there ever a good reason to challenge any of that, to put the feet straighter ahead, to perhaps strengthen maybe a weakness of some sort?
I wouldn't necessarily use it as another variation of the squat.
Because it
but-
might cause more problems than is worth it, maybe.
Exactly.
Because
And
that's the way they're put together.
I would test it and see if they feel more comfortable, if they feel stronger.
Right.
Anything else?
No, I agree
to
with
add
that.
there? Okay, cool. I don't know what you were gonna go to next, but I don't want to forget about
Yeah,
this.
you're on
one.
a roll. Keep going.
Okay. All right, so we've covered bar position, we've covered position of the feet, position of the toes,
Walk out.
walk out. Okay, now when you have the bar on your back and you're about to initiate the squat, one cue that has really helped me a ton is to screw my feet into the ground and externally rotate my femurs so I can engage the muscles that are on the lateral side of my
That
hip.
cue was created by me, by the way.
Really? Screw the floor? It helps so much because it really
I measured
helps
that.
you. It really helps you create more stability around the hip. So now you have the lateral portion of the hip engaged. An extra thing that I've found very helpful is to learn how to engage the muscles that are in the front of the hip. So the speed of the bar, before I get into that, the speed of the bar during the descent should only be as fast as you can control. But it's not only about the speed of the bar, but also about the amount of control that you have. So this drill, this is how I teach someone who might not understand the cue. Now, when you're going down into the hole, it's not just about slowing down the descent and making sure that you have control over the bar, but also to be able to summon all the muscles that are around the hip. Now, we use the Mark Bell cue of screwing your feet into the ground to get the lateral muscles of the hip. And now you're gonna also use the muscles that are in front of your hip by thinking about driving your knees up and trying to bring your knees into your chest.
Oh, I like that cue a lot because I see a lot of people drive their knees downward as they squat lower.
Really?
Well, because they keep continuing to drive their knees forward. So their
Okay.
knees are like running away from them.
Exactly.
So that makes a lot of sense.
You want to try to bring your knees upwards towards your chest. So now you're engaging the front, the side, and back of your.
Almost like you're trying to pull yourself down with your hip flexors.
Exactly. And the way that I teach it is here, lay down on your back. So what you're gonna do, I'm gonna hold your feet like this, okay? You're gonna bend your knees and try to bring your knees towards your chest. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, as if you're squatting. Pull me forward, pull me forward, pull me forward. And now I'm gonna keep pulling, but you're gonna let me win, okay? Do it again. Good. Now let me win.
Probably kind of hard, huh?
Good. So that's the movement. That's how I usually teach people how to engage kind of the front of their hips. So you got to be mindful not only at what speed you're descending to, but you got to be mindful of all the muscles that are around your hip so you can summon them all and create more stability at the hip so your legs can create more power.
Think of those legs, being like buried in sand, like when you're on the beach. And think about how you would pull yourself down to the ground if your legs were kind of stuck and anchored into something.
Mm-hmm. But the next thing.
Next thing, what do we?
You got her under the bar. You were walking out.
Step forward and descend.
We covered depth with the test. You're good in either type of shoe.
Now, another great reason why you want to slow down the descent of the squat is because the analogy that I like to use is that of archery. You don't see an archer cock their arrow really fast and then let it go without control. You see them really think about where they're going and then hold it there and then go. In the squat, it's no different, especially when you have hundreds of pounds on your back, when you have a belt, when you have wraps or whatever that might be, you're in front of a crowd. You really need to be precise with your movement and know exactly where your hips are going. So slowing down the movement even a little bit. I'm not saying squat super slow, but squat at a speed that allows you to change your movement as you go and allows you to control and know exactly where you're being positioned in space.
Yeah, a lot of the people that you see dealing with issues like getting dumped forward in the squat are people with super fast descents. They'll hit the hole, and they're not necessarily aligned properly because they don't have that control. They hit the bottom, and right away the first thing to go is their upper back. Mm-hmm. So just add to your point.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So she walked the weight back.
Oh yeah,
you
let's
want to
try
have
it
her
and
actually
try
just
that
do a
cue.
squat?
Yeah.
And just like the bow and arrow, your ascent should be as fast as possible. You always want to be explosive in your ascent.
Yeah.
Slow and controlled in the descent, and fast in the ascent.
Mm-hmm. Good. Now remember, try to externally rotate your femurs. And now you're going to try to bring your knees towards your chest, just like you did on the floor. Yep, good. And then you're on your elbows to also stay in line with your torso. You don't want them to start flailing up because that might lead you to dump the bar forward.
Another thing that we see a lot, or that's discussed a lot, is whether or not people should be bouncing out of the hole of the squat. That's something that you see, you know, Olympic weightlifters are known for hitting the hole super hard, using the spring and the whip of the bar to get up.
You can rest, Steph.
Yeah, you can rack it. And a lot of power lifters do the opposite. They do take a slow and controlled approach, hit the bottom a little softer and come up. And I think the bow and arrow analogy works here as well, where you want to be able to go as quickly as you can with control. So you never want to free fall from the top, but that last little bit, you can use a little bit to get the stretch reflex out of your tendons, but you never want to just basically have the full weight being supported by tendons and ligaments.
Maybe reverse the weight yourself, right? Like have the
I like that
ability
too.
to stay in the
Yeah.
proper position throughout the whole thing, where you're not just blobbing down into the hole and trying to bounce out of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I saw that some with helping some CrossFitters years ago, and what I did to help remedy that was some pause squats. I'd have them actually, but they weren't allowed to pause with their like hamstrings resting on their calves. I had them pause a little bit higher, and it annihilated all of them. Even when I had them do a squat where they weren't breaking parallel almost on purpose, they had a hard time trying to control and reverse the weight. So they're so used to kind of
Sure.
what you're talking about, kind
Yeah.
of dive bombing.
Yeah.
But what it did is, in the long run, it made them stronger. It took a little while, but over a period of time, it made them a lot stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think they get confused and they think that spring that they're feeling when they hit the hole really fast with almost no control
It's a
is
stretch
the stretch
reflex.
reflex, but really that's not what it is at all. You've talked about that in the past, right?
Yeah. I can't remember exactly what I said, but do you remember?
No, but we should link it. But
Shane Hammond, you ever see Shane Hammond?
yeah, well, he was a weightlifter and a power lifter.
Shane Hammond had, picture this, Shane Hammond had 30-inch calves. 30-inch calves. And he would dive bomb his legs, his huge thick legs onto his calves, and boom, he'd spring out of the bottom. He squatted 1,000 pounds, so that guy knew what he was doing, but it's rare to see somebody like not blow something apart or get screwed up or have
And you get those genetic
it being a
anomalies too.
limiting factor, yeah.
No matter what they do, you know, you could
Yeah,
drop
you-
that guy off a building, you could land on his feet, he's probably going to be okay, you know, but
Yeah.
that's not most of us.
Yeah, you can't base an advice on an outlier.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome.
Anything else you want to cover?
Cody?
You want to test it out?
let's-
So wait, you said you don't squat? What do you mean?
He
What are you doing
squats.
here?
I was
What are you doing here?
That's what what are you doing?
So my
But you used to squat.
No, he's new. He's just,
Oh, you're
he's just
new.
learning.
dude working out.
Okay, so you're new. You came here. You had a motorcycle accident, and since you haven't tried to squat.
Maybe here and there I attempt to,
okay.
but it doesn't look very good, so that's why I don't do it on camera normally.
Okay.
He's in the middle of studying the time-space continuum. Yeah. He's trying to build a time machine.
I was a physics major.
Interesting.
So close, yeah.
Force equals times mass times acceleration.
Don't block our depth cam.
Oh, sorry.
Internet cam. Go for it, buddy. Get in there.
2, 3. Now, externally rotate your femurs, torque the ground, and bring your knees towards your chest. Look forward a little bit more. With your head, your eyes.
Head up.
That's something we didn't talk about yet. Head position.
Yeah. You never really want to encourage any sort of rounding of the spine, so it all starts with your head. If you're looking down and your upper back, it's
Can
gonna
you
promote
widen your
upper back
stance a little bit?
rounding,
Just to see?
and that's going to carry over to rounding of the spine elsewhere. So you want to keep everything neutral.
How does that feel? I think that looks a lot better.
Yeah, he moves pretty damn good.
Yeah, not bad. You had a really good point, a video that you shot with Jordan Shallow about immobility in the shoulders, creating excess mobility elsewhere, and what kind of problems that can cause.
Oh, good.
You want to touch on that
Oh,
quickly?
really good.
Yeah, so it's
gotta
common
do it all.
it's common especially in bigger guys that they keep squatting, they keep getting more and more restricted, especially on their shoulders. You know, they're benching more, they're gaining more muscle mass, and they're losing range of motion, mobility on their shoulders. And their solution naturally is to keep widening their grip and widening their grip and widening their grip. Then they start running into other issues like elbow pain, bicep pain. Some people even have increased incidence of bicep tears. It's pretty common in powerlifting. And This injury is often painted as a result of overuse, but I think I had a conversation with Jordan the other day, and we actually think it's the opposite. It's a result of misuse. Now, anytime that you have decreased range of motion in one joint, you have increased range of motion at a different joint. So if you start lacking external rotation, if you start lacking extension of the upper back, now you start compensating for that lack of motion at this joint. You start compensating and using other joints more. Now, the role of the biceps is to obviously flex the arm, but also to supinate the forearm. So now, at the extent of the loss of range of motion at the shoulder with external rotation, you start getting that external rotation from the bicep, from the forearm, and straining the bicep more, and even the structures on the elbow here in the middle. So something that you want to keep in mind as you get more and more into lifting, don't just neglect the fact that you're experiencing loss of range of motion in certain joints and ignore that and try to find other ways to move, but rather try to constantly be working on that so that you don't lose your range of motion in the first place and then expose yourself to other types of injuries like bicep tears and elbow strains.
What did you say earlier about internal rotation and flexion?
Coupled motions of the hip. Yeah.
But the same thing can happen at
So-
the shoulder, right? So if I've lost the ability to externally rotate, I lost the ability to go right and be wrenched into this good position. Now I'm here, and now I come up out of the bottom of my squat, and I'm internally rotated here. I'm going to be rounding here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I squat the way I squat, because I end up like this. So there was no internet when I was doing this stuff. I was trying to figure it out on my own, and there was no Steph Cohen to correct me, so I just ended up way out here.
Is that how wide you are right now?
I'm even wider. I use a squat bar and just go as wide as I can. Sometimes I'll push the plates out even. I have to just, the other option is just not to squat, just because how tight the chest is.
So what are you doing to work on that?
Oh, you're gonna get a lecture.
I am squatting with specialty bars. That's what I'm doing, because I don't compete anymore,
So
I can
are
just
you
use
alive?
a safety bar. I can use a...
Are you living?
I feel like it. I feel great.
So then you should, that's a good enough reason to work on your mobility.
I don't
He goes,
like
I'm
that.
not competing anymore, so I shouldn't be working on that.
I don't like it. I can do it.
Cut that part of the video, please. A terrible example you're setting for people.
I know.
Mark does his mobility daily. He wakes up,
Every
first thing he
day.
does
It's
in
a
the
whole
morning.
routine.
Yes,
The whole routine.
along with the meditation.
Well, I think, unfortunately, if I was to really make a lot of progress in that area, I think I'd have to stop wrecking myself with some of this too.
I don't think so. I think you can do
No?
both.
Both at the same time?
Yeah.
We'll chat after the video. She'll give you some mobility.
I don't know. She's like 19 years old or something. What's next? What do we got next?
That's it.
Where'd Jessica
I
go?
think
Did we
we've
lose her?
covered everything.
Yeah, that's the squat.
That's a squat for you.
You got it all.
Yeah.
Nailed it all.
Yeah.
What about, let's see, a couple little things that happen to people that I see. Bar rolls up their back a little bit when they go to squat.
Yeah, I think that's. I think usually that's an immobility issue in the shoulder, just like we were talking about. If you lack that external rotation in the shoulder, a lot of times you're gonna end up in that position. And, you know, you throw a few hundred pounds on top of that, and you're already in this position. It's just gonna exacerbate that issue. So you're gonna see people rolling over.
Yeah.
What about people's butts shooting up first?
Yeah.
What about
Crazy.
people's butts shooting up first in the squat? They got to come up out of the bottom of the hole, and the first thing that moves is their butt.
I think there's a couple reasons why that can happen. I think.
Turns into a two-part lift kind of deal.
Yeah, I think the first thing is people having weak glutes. So the glute is the main extensor of the hip, and when that's weak, you rely on other structures to help you extend the hips. So somebody with weak glutes hits the bottom, and they can't use those glutes to push the hips through.
So
what
they
end
rely
up
on the
doing
quads
is-
to extend the knees.
Well, you can see that where they rely on the quads to extend the knee, and then also coupled with them using their erectors to finish the lift as well. So you see people kind of, when this happens, when they bend forward, and then they finish the lift by extending their back. So, you know, that's obviously a position that's compromising to the back. You don't want to do that. And it's also going to affect the amount of weight that you can lift.
Yeah, it's not energy efficient.
Yeah.
It
So-
seems like the body wants to go to like a comfortable position, but not the most optimal, right?
course.
Like that's what the body's trying to do. Like, let's be as comfortable as we can, but it's
Sure.
not in your best interest to really end up there because it ends up being a weak spot sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And
what-
it just favors the areas that it's strongest at. It's not taking into account how that's going to make you
Sure.
feel in the future.
Yeah, and it continues to build a bigger problem, because now every time you're doing a squat, you're training yourself to push with your quads and use your back to finish the lift, and those two areas just keep getting stronger and stronger from doing that. And the glutes, which should be the muscle that's helping you bring your hips through, are getting neglected.
But here's the mistake that most people make. Now say that they've identified an area that's weakest for them. So they've identified that they have a what I call a stripper squat, and now they looked up on the internet and they found this video, and it says that your glutes and quads are weak and that you should be working on that. You should change your technique, or they saw another video that said that you should change their technique to try to strengthen that specific area. The mistake most people make is that they start working a lot on those weaknesses and then they start neglecting what they were strongest at. So now when they go back to their original squat, then they find that it doesn't necessarily translate directly into them being able to maintain those positions and improve their technique, because they weren't really practicing it. So strengthen your weaknesses, but don't neglect your strengths.
Yeah, in another area, I guess the hips could just be really tight, right? Like if your hip flexors are super tight and you don't have the ability to kind of maintain a good position, you're going to kind of be in this position anyway, and maybe when you come up, maybe your butt shoots up.
Yeah.
Some of that kind of stuff. What about bracing? What do you guys teach as far as bracing in a squat?
You want to talk about it? You shot some good videos on it. The balloon video I thought was a really good one.
Well, I don't really use IQ for bracing. I think people make bracing a lot more complicated than it actually is. I don't know why people get so caught up on it. Basically, the whole thing with bracing is you brace in order to create more intra-abdominal pressure on your spine. That in turn helps you have a feeling of a sturdier spine. That's all that is. Now, the way that you do it is you take a deep breath and you expand your abdomen, and that happens naturally. Even if you want to keep look, I've taken hundreds of pictures squatting, and I've tried to make myself flex in those pictures, and my abdomen always goes out, because that is how you brace. It's just so ingrained. So you just take a deep breath and expand your abdomen, expand your belly. That's what naturally happens. It's just a matter of being able to coordinate that, especially if you're doing multiple reps. After every rep, you want to take a deep breath, let the air go, and then take another deep breath, and then go again.
I think, and if you're struggling to do that and you want sort of like a tactile cue to help you with that, I think wearing a belt, but loosely, so that way you can work on pushing out into the belt. Like maybe if you have a prong belt, like a rung or two out farther than you would, and just sort of being able to fill the space.
Here's a good way to cue someone. Cody, here, I'll show you. Go ahead and lay on your back again. Bend your knees.
Too.
Okay, so you're gonna put some sort of, I usually use collars because they're a little bit smaller. But what you're gonna do, you keep your back neutral, all right? Okay. Don't draw your belly button in. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna take a deep breath and you're gonna try to push your belly against the plate. So make it lift as much as possible. So go ahead, take a deep breath, push out. Hold it, 3, 2, 1, let go. Okay, you're gonna do that again. Push out, bring that plate up. There you go, that's it. 3, 2, 1, go. Let's do 2 more. Good, that's it, up. Yeah, there you go. 3, 2, 1, and 1 more. Try to make it as tall as possible. Yeah, that's it, good. 3, 2, 1, go. Good, so the last one was your best one.
Okay.
So usually people, when they think about bracing, they draw their belly button in. That's not necessarily what's going to create the most amount of intra-abdominal pressure. You want to draw the belly out, especially if you have a belt.
Right.
Bring as much air in as you can.
I think that's a great way to train the idea of the movement and sort of figure out the concept. And then obviously you can't do the same thing while you're in a squat. So I do want to clarify, if you're going to do the looser belt technique, to try to use that to push your stomach up the same way, make sure you're doing it with light weight. That's something you could do on like a very light warm-up set, but not something, you don't want to put your belt on loose and then try to go for a PR or something like that.
How did all this hybrid stuff start? How did you guys get started with, you got a lot of people online interested in what you guys are doing, and I see the growth of everything. How did it kick off?
Initially it started with us training that way, training hybrid style, which initially included combining Olympic weightlifting, powerlifting, and some functional bodybuilding or accessories. And people saw us training that way and got really interested. And we actually before we started, so we created the software, and then we needed 15 people to test it out. So we
That was our
posted-
goal.
That was our
at the
goal,
time.
yeah, to get 15
beta
people,
testers.
beta testers, to test the software that we had created, which you invested almost all the money that you had in it initially. And when we posted it up on our Instagram, and at that time we didn't have stories, just on our Instagram, we got 400 replies, people that were interested in it. And that was a really good cue for us to realize that there was definitely there was a need and there was an interest. And then after that, I think I attribute most of the success and the growth of the business to us genuinely caring about the people that we're helping, and doing it for the right reasons. You know, just wanting to, like you, make the place a better place to lift, and just disseminate good information, try to get more people in the gym, improve their self-esteem, their confidence, empower women, empower everyone. And also just delivering way more than we're promising. Just trying to always provide more value than anyone else, and than the money that you're charging. So for us, we charge $30 a month per membership, and in that they get 15 different programs. They get access to a private community on Facebook. They get access to 6 coaches, including Olympians. Fernando Reyes is part of our team now, a strongman coach that has gone to World's Strongest Man, us, Rachel LeBlanc-Bassinet, who's a national level Olympic weightlifter, international level weightlifter. So we just have a really full team that's willing to help everyone out, and just for $30 a month, I feel like that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't sure what to do, right? And a lot of people want to be told what to do, even.
Sure. And a lot of people want to do a ton of different things. So we wanted to sort of be a one-stop shop for all of that. You know, if someone wants to do gymnastics, we have someone who can help you with that. We have a gymnastics coach in a program. If you want to do strongman, we have that. You know, if you want to do Olympic weightlifting, we have that. So we just wanted to be able to reach as many people as possible. And
Exactly, affordability and access.
yeah,
That was what we based it on.
Nutrition, mobility,
Yep,
anything fitness.
fitness A to Z.
exactly.
Fucking awesome. It's always awesome to have you guys here. Thank you guys so much. What's your YouTube? Pump it out to this YouTube and
My YouTube,
sign off for me.
Yeah, my YouTube is fairly new, so guys, please come on, help me out. My YouTube is Stefi Cohen. My Instagram is @StefiCohen.
You can find me at Hayden.Bowe on Instagram, or on Stefi's YouTube channel.
Catch
And
you
hybrid,
guys.
all things hybrid.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
at Hybrid Performance Method. You can find everything from there.
Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something from this tutorial, and take a few things and get stronger on the squat. And catch you guys next time.
Boom.